Hello, welcome. My name is Mindy Taylor, and I'm the Director of Digital Equity Initiatives at Hillsborough Education Foundation. We are presenting this webinar as part of an educational series created by the Tech Connect program, which is funded by the Children's Board of Hillsborough County. I would like to introduce Joanne, our program assistant, who will be running our show for us today. Our e-learning coaches have created some great information about learning styles, and they will introduce themselves before they present their information. This will be recorded so that we can send it out to families when we're finished. We may have time at the end for questions, and thank you so much for joining us today. So Andre, I'd like to pass it over to you to get us started.
All right, my name is Andre. I am an e-learning coach here at Hillsborough Education Foundation. And today I am here to go over with you learning styles. What type of learner is your child? So just as kind of a rundown for our agenda today, we've got about 5 points of emphasis that we're going to present to you today. We're going to go over what learning is briefly, do a brief descriptor of the history of e-learning, and then we're going to dive right into the learning styles, go over some resources, and of course, take any questions that you may have. So what is learning? It's pretty simple, right? Learning is the acquisition of new knowledge, skills, or information. Learning actually starts at birth. You will notice a child is trying to learn their environment or learn about the people that surround them. And the environment is a very critical factor for learning. So e-learning, has evolved. E-learning started off as distance learning, which actually started through actual direct mail. And then through technology and through time, it evolved into e-learning. It started gaining popularity in the early 2000s when businesses were using it for staff training and personal development. And then, of course, it boomed and skyrocketed in the 2010s with social media. And of course, all the way to today, where we are using e-learning as an alternative for going into the classroom because of the pandemic. But the good news is that it's a lot of evidence that shows that it can be effective if done properly. So today we're going to go over the 3 learning types. You have auditory, you have visual, and you also have kinesthetic/tactile. So now I'm going to turn it over to Lamine.
Thanks a lot, Andre. So as we get into auditory learning, I'm going to just give a short scenario. So we have Sam. Sam's a student in the 3rd grade, and he has a unique way of learning. After his teachers finish reading aloud instructions for assignments, Sam often repeats them to himself, unlike a lot of his classmates. He really gets in a rhythm when his mom puts on the radio at home, and so that's pretty interesting as well. However, he seems to struggle most when assignment instructions and accompanying images are placed on the computer screen for the students to read on their own. So this would be a typical example of someone who is an auditory learner. Auditory learners are people who best acquire information by hearing and listening. Typically, they understand and remember things that they've heard, and they store information based on the way that it sounds. So auditory learners also often understand spoken instructions rather than written ones, very much like our sample student, Sam, and they learn by reading information out loud. So it's really important for auditory learners, not just to hear other people say information, but kind of strengthen that acquisition of knowledge by speaking it themselves. So some of the behaviors that auditory learners exhibit are humming, reading out loud. They enjoy being read to. They prefer to read instructions over seeing examples or instructions, and they enjoy listening to music. So obviously, e-learning, there's things that you can't replicate from a traditional classroom. And so there's ways in which auditory learners, they've been impacted by this pandemic in which they're learning at home. There's a less opportunity for peer discussions, less opportunities for group brainstorming, for formation of ideas, since they're kind of isolated with the computer. And they might not be as prone to ask questions, even though the opportunity is there. Again, that interface with the device is not the same as having a teacher who's in front of you. So we have to really be mindful of auditory learners, and if you feel like your child kind of fits this description, these are ways in which he or she may be struggling throughout the year, or may have been struggling throughout the year. So you may be wondering, how can you help? Now that you know my child is probably an auditory learner, what are some things I can do to help them? There's a couple of tips. One is just engaging your child about the studies that they've been involved in that day. Engage them in conversation. The more that they're talking, the more they're hearing themselves talk, the better it is for their acquisition and retention of knowledge. The other is pretty simple, is providing your child with headphones, sometimes even optically, for the kids to know they're putting on something that's going to aid their acoustics. It might just increase the way that they retain knowledge. So that's a really good tip. Another one is encouraging the child to teach back, or teach back what they've learned to initiate discussion. You can feign like a lack of comprehension on your own part. Say, you know what, Sam, or you know what, Jalen, I don't really understand what the teacher is talking about. Could you explain it to me? And the more that your child has an opportunity to explain what the teacher has just explained to them, they are kind of teaching themselves without even knowing it, perhaps. And finally, reading to them often is really, really important. It's key. They always used to say reading is fundamental, but the more that they hear your voice, passing on information, that's probably the best way in which for them to retain information regarding school and any other things you want to teach your child.
All right, thanks, Lamine. My name is Jessica, and I'm one of the other e-learning coaches for the Tech Connect program. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about our visual learners. So before we get started, I wanted to share a little scenario with you about our student here. Her name is Cherry, and she is a third grade student at Great Lunches Elementary. So over the past year, Cherry has been an e-learner student. She is not going to the school for her classes. She's a very creative little girl and loves to draw. So in her Zoom class recently, the teacher began talking about a new character in their reading book. And while the teacher is explaining this character, she notices that Cherry is not looking at the teacher. She's not looking at her, and instead she is doodling in her notebook. So the teacher stops her lesson and says, Cherry, stop daydreaming, eyes on me, and pay attention. So Cherry stops her doodling and watches the teacher. And at the end of the lecture, the teacher asked the children if they had any questions about this character. And our Cherry raises her hand and asks, "Teacher, can you repeat the question?" So I wanted to share that scenario with you because I think Cherry represents, has a lot of the same characteristics that we'll see in visual learners. So a visual learner needs to see things in order to understand them. They can do this by reading or seeing information on a chalkboard or a whiteboard. They prefer to look at pictures and graphs or illustrations. Visual learners typically do well in an online learning setting because of the use of PowerPoint presentations, images, and the use of visual media. So some of the characteristics that we see with visual learners are they do better with reading instructions, but not hearing instructions from their teacher. They may also say, "Show me," when they want to learn something new. They typically do best studying alone or in a quiet environment. And they may need a little bit more time to process new information. And much like Cherry, a lot of visual learners are artistic and creative. They like to draw, doodle, and they really enjoy making posters or other projects that they may get to do for class. They tend to also like to play and solve puzzles, play with Legos, and other 3D play. So some of the challenges that our visual learners may face is that their mind often wanders during a teacher's lecture. And we saw this with Cherry. Her teacher thought that she was daydreaming. However, she may have not been daydreaming. She may have just been looking away so that she wasn't overstimulated by the visuals from her teacher. They also struggle to listen to instructions. They often ask the teacher to repeat information, as did Cherry at the end of the lecture. And sometimes they do struggle with organization and time management. So you may be asking, how can I help my child if they are a visual learner? So while they're in class with e-learning, some of the study strategies that we would recommend are that they should always have a notebook or a piece of paper that will allow for them to take notes, draw, or doodle. I would also encourage them to take notes in their own handwriting. This is very different from typing notes. When they do write out their own notes, it helps them commit it to memory. You can also help them with creating to-do lists, using colors to color code subjects, or they can use symbols for notes. They could use a star to star something that they really enjoy. They could use a question mark to note something that they have more questions about. And of course, always allow for doodling space on their notebooks. So some study strategies that you can use while your child is at home or doing homework is the use of flashcards. These are great for learning new vocabulary terms or math solutions. I would also recommend using headphones and use study music. So study music would be something that is instrumental or classical. Also let them write their own practice test or quizzes. And if you want to make it even more interesting, you can also take the quiz with them and see who can get the best score. Now for help with reading comprehension, I would recommend having your child illustrate a story or a passage from a story.
All right, now we've landed on the kinesthetic/tactile learner. So before I begin, I actually want to share a story with you about a student. So my guy, Jerry's in the first grade. Jerry loves PE. Jerry loves to play sports. Jerry loves to move around. Jerry often struggles with sitting down and completing tasks such as writing or reading. Anything that requires minimal movement, Jerry struggles with. Now, anything that requires him to be able to build something, such as blocks or Legos, he's great at. Jerry is most likely a kinesthetic or tactile learner. He learns best through movement. So kinesthetic or tactile learners, as I said, learns best through movement and touch. These students usually show an urge to move, usually at all times, especially when intaking information. They're the ones that's tapping their desk, shaking their leg, biting their nails, bouncing. And they usually excel at physical activities that involve movement, such as sports, swimming, or running. And these people usually prefer a more hands-on approach, and they learn best through the experience. They want to experience it. So they usually dive head first into anything that they're engaged in or that they want to learn, and they have sort of a just do it type of attitude. So the behaviors, as we said, they like to move around a lot. They prefer not to sit still. They prefer to move while doing a task, such as studying, even something that you would normally do sitting still. They like to participate in learning. They like to do things rather than read about them. And obviously they don't prefer reading, and they usually don't spell well just because that's a task that you have to sit down in order to learn how to do. And they enjoy problem solving by doing something. So how has e-learning impacted this learner? Well, unfortunately for e-learners, there is little to no hands-on experience because the experience is occurring virtually. So you don't have that hands-on experience or interaction with your environment for learning. Less space to move around in the classroom. So usually with the classroom, it's gonna be a lot more spread out than just a space for e-learning. So that gives the learner a lot more opportunity to get up and move around and keep themselves stimulated. No centers. Some students are in classes or a part of a course that utilizes centers. And these centers usually specialize in one part or whatever they're learning about, and they get to get up and move to that center. And that could be highly stimulating for a learner in a classroom, a kinesthetic learner, and less manipulative for a tactile sensation. So your blocks, your cards, your tools, all the things that would be in a classroom in abundance, these things are a lot less likely to occur in an e-learning classroom, usually because you're at home and it's just not normally used. The primary use for that room is usually not for learning. So how can you help? Well, one of the items you can do is utilize a manipulative such as flashcards or blocks. And note that some of these solutions to these issues or problems may overlap through learning styles, but you will find that they are all useful. You want to allow moments for students to stand up for short periods of time. So maybe mark that somewhere on a schedule or have allotted designated times for the student to stand up just so they don't go idle. Allot time for breaks so that they can stretch or move briefly. You want to establish a morning routine that involves a lot of movement. The one thing that has been lost or that the kinesthetic learner does not have to their advantage anymore is the transition from from home to school. That transition involves a lot of movement, and that movement can be highly stimulating for that learner. So now that that has been lost, it will be important to establish a morning routine that includes that movement so you can kind of get them going with the right stimulation. And you want to provide templates and handouts for completions, just because they get a chance, just for the simple fact that they'll get a chance to check things off. And it's more of an actionary item that they use movement for over doing something, virtually in a sense. So here's some of the resources. We kind of added this visual that kind of sums up what we went over. We ourselves actually will also be sending out some links and some different other resources that will highlight some of the information that we just went over, just to kind of take a deeper dive into this, what we would consider very important information or useful information. All right, any questions?